The wind howled low across the prairie like a wounded animal, dragging dust across the fence line where she hung. Her wrists, raw and swollen, were tied with coarse hemp rope to a splintered fence post that hadn't seen fresh paint in years. Morning light struck the ground in streaks of gold and blood. There was no movement, no sound but the whine of wind and the occasional flap of a buzzard's wing. Her name was Sadie, 18, though she looked younger. Too much bone in her cheeks, too much silence in her eyes. She didn't cry. She hadn't the night before, and she wouldn't now. Her lips were cracked, her dress torn, the hem caked in dried mud. Her hair, once combed in braids by a mother long buried, clung to her face in sweaty clumps. Miles away, the sound of hooves echoed faintly. The rider was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, dust-coated, and hard-eyed. Jace Carter wasn't a lawman or an outlaw, but something in between, an old rancher-turned-loner, who spoke more to his horse than to people. He was returning from a supply run, the kind that took 3 days when it should have taken 1. Not because the trail was long, but because the silence of the plains gave him reason to take the long way home. It was near noon when he spotted her, a shape too still to be natural. His horse slowed, ears twitching. Jace narrowed his eyes against the sun, drew his rifle, and approached like he was riding up on a sleeping cougar. She didn't move. Her chin hung low, but her knees were locked like she'd forced herself to stay upright. When he got close enough to see the rope biting into her skin, he cursed under his breath and slid down from the saddle. "Girl," he said, voice rough with disuse. "You hear me?" Her head turned slightly, her lips parted, but no sound came. He cut her free with a hunting knife and caught her before she collapsed. She weighed next to nothing. The smell of sweat, fear, and old whiskey clung to her. He laid her gently in the shade of the fence, fetched a canteen, and tipped it to her lips. She drank like a desert coyote, fast, desperate, and without shame. Jace didn't ask who did this. He didn't need to. It was written in the bruises on her arms, the way her ribs poked through her dress, and the set of wagon tracks leading away from the fence. A single pair of prints accompanied them. Heavy boots, deep heel, man stride. Jace spat into the dirt. "You got a name?" She nodded barely. "You gonna tell me?" Her lips trembled. "Sadie. That it?" She nodded again. "Well, Sadie," he said, glancing toward the sun, "you're riding with me." He hoisted her into the saddle first, then climbed up behind her. She leaned into him out of necessity, not trust. He didn't mind. He'd known wild things before. Trust came later, if at all. The ride was long and quiet. He didn't speak again until they passed a dry creek where the bones of a deer lay half buried. "Ain't right what he done," he said, more to himself than her. "Some man ain't fit to walk among decent folk." She didn't answer. His ranch was 2 miles past the last pine grove. A low cabin sat at the foot of a bluff, half swallowed by shadow. A barn leaned against the wind like it had lost the will to stand. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. He carried her inside, laid her on a straw-stuffed cot, and covered her with his spare blanket. She didn't resist. Her eyes closed the moment her head hit the pillow. Jace sat on the porch for a while, whittling a stick and watching the line of the hills. His mind wandered to other times, other women. His wife had died 7 winters ago, too soon for goodbye. Since then, he hadn't kept company longer than a bottle or a campfire. But this girl wasn't company. She was wounded, and maybe worse than wounded. She was a storm bottled behind calm eyes. That night, the wind turned cold. Coyotes sang somewhere in the valley. Inside, the fire crackled low. Jace dozed in a chair, hat tipped forward, boots still on. She screamed. The sound ripped through the cabin like gunfire. Jace was on his feet in seconds, revolver drawn, eyes scanning for shadows. Sadie sat up on the cot, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her face was wet now, streaked with tears. Her voice cracked as she stammered. "He's coming back. He said he'd come back for me." Jace lowered the gun slowly. "He's not going to touch you again," he said, quiet but firm. "You don't know him," she whispered, voice shaking. "You don't know what he's like when he's mean." "I don't have to," Jace replied. "Ain't the first bastard I've run off." She didn't answer, but her shoulders relaxed an inch. Just one. Enough. Jace sat back down, kept the revolver close. He didn't ask more questions. Sometimes silence was all a person had left. But as he watched the flames cast long shadows on the log walls, he knew the storm hadn't passed. It had just circled back for another run. The night stretched long, and the coyotes kept howling. The morning sun crept over the horizon in streaks of orange and pale gold, painting the prairie in soft light. Jace stepped onto the porch, a tin cup of black coffee steaming in his hand. He caught sight of her, sitting on a stump near the corral, arms wrapped around her knees, staring out at nothing. She hadn't spoken again after the nightmare, but her eyes were clearer now, still guarded, still rimmed with shadows, but awake in a way they hadn't been before. He let her be. Pushing her wouldn't help, and he'd learned a long time ago that healing had its own pace. He spent the morning repairing the barn roof, a job long overdue. From time to time, he glanced toward her. She didn't move, just sat there like she was rooted in place, as much a part of the land as the tumbleweeds drifting through the dust. By midday, he came down and offered her a plate, beans, cornbread, and a fried egg. She took it without looking at him, eating slowly, deliberately. It was her first real meal, and who knew how long. "You feelin' any stronger?" he asked. She gave a single nod. "Need new clothes," he said after a moment. "Those rags ain't worth much against a wind." She glanced at her torn dress and clutched the fabric tighter across her chest. "I'll ride into town tomorrow," he added, as if it were nothing. "Get a few things. You can stay here." "No," she said, voice raspy. "I'll go." It caught him off guard, but he didn't argue. Maybe she wanted to prove something, to him or to herself. He understood that better than most. That afternoon, she helped him mend a broken section of fence. Her hands were blistered within the hour, but she didn't complain. Her movements were clumsy, but determined. She was tougher than she looked. That quiet kind of tough born from surviving rather than fighting. Jace watched her, offering tips without sounding like a teacher. She listened, eyes narrowed, brow furrowed in concentration. "Where'd you learn to do this?" she asked suddenly. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "My old man taught me. Wasn't much for talking, but he knew fences." "Was he good to you?" Jace chuckled dryly. "Not particularly, but he didn't tie me to one, so I guess that's something." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but it softened her face. "You miss him?" "No," he said, plain and honest. "Do you miss yours?" She didn't answer, but he hadn't expected her to. Later, they sat on the porch together, two figures silhouetted against a purple sky. The air had turned cooler, and the stillness between them had begun to shift. Not warm, exactly, but no longer cold. "Was your wife nice?" she asked after a long silence. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, real nice. Had a laugh that could scare off a storm." "What happened?" "Fever got her," he said simply. "One winter she didn't make it through." Sadie traced a crack in the porch wood with her finger. "You ever wish you'd gone with her?" He looked at her, really looked. There wasn't pity in her voice, just honesty. Maybe too much of it. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Back then, anyway. But time's a stubborn thing. You keep waking up, even when you don't want to." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I used to think maybe if I did everything right, he'd stop hating me. But he never did." "No matter how right you are," Jace said, "some folks just come out wrong." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were tired, but not hopeless. That night, a colt wandered limping into the yard. One of the neighbors likely. It had a cut on its leg, and eyes full of panic. Sadie moved toward it without thinking, soft hands outstretched, voice low and steady. The colt hesitated, then let her touch it. Jace watched from the shadows. He saw something in her that night, something neither pain nor hunger had taken. She knelt beside the animal, pressing her skirt to its wound. "Easy now," she whispered. "You're not alone." He helped her bandage it, and they led it into the barn together. "You got a name for him?" he asked. She shook her head. "Don't want to name things that might not stay." He didn't press her, just tied the colt off and handed her a blanket. That night, Thunder rumbled far off in the distance, the kind that warned of more than weather. As Jace cleaned his rifle on the porch, he caught a flicker of movement near the horizon. A rider. Too far to make out details, but close enough to feel wrong. Lone men didn't ride through this country without reason. He stood, squinting hard. Sadie stepped out behind him. Someone's coming. Yeah, he said. She didn't flinch. If it's him. If it is. Jace replied. He's got a hell of a surprise waiting. She looked at him then, eyes steady. He ain't the only one you should worry about. Jace turned to her. What do you mean? But she didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back inside, her shadow stretching long across the floorboards. The wind picked up again. Dry, cold, unsettling. Jace holstered the rifle and followed her in, leaving the night to watch over them with all its secrets. The saloon doors creaked wide as the stranger stepped in, his spurs clinking with each slow step across the warped floorboards. Dust clung to the hem of his long coat, and his eyes, cold and pale, scanned the room like a hawk sizing up prey. Boone Mercer wasn't the kind of man folks welcomed with open arms. He carried trouble the way others carried coin, tight in the palm and ready to spend. The bartender went rigid behind the counter. What'll it be? Boone set a weathered photograph on the bar instead of answering. It showed a girl, young, dirt-smeared, eyes full of fire. Seen her. The bartender didn't look too long. Can't say I have. Boone leaned in, voice low but dangerous. Think again. After a long pause, the bartender nodded once, subtly, toward a rancher sitting near the window. Heard tell Jace Carter brought a girl in from the prairie. Said she was half-starved. Could be her. Boone smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He took the photo back, tipped his hat without thanks, and left. Miles away, Sadie was sitting on the porch, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot coffee. She didn't drink it. She just held it for the warmth. Jace was in the barn, hammering new boards into the stall. The colt was healing fast. She visited it every morning, whispering things she didn't tell people. The wind carried the scent of mesquite and dust. She stiffened, eyes narrowing toward the hills. There was something different in the air. Something off. A shift, subtle but sharp. Inside the barn, Jace paused mid-swing. His instincts itched. He stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. Sadie was already on her feet, eyes on the distant ridge. You feel it too? He asked. She nodded. It's not just my father. He walked to the porch rail, following her gaze. Who else would come looking? She hesitated, voice barely a whisper. Boone Mercer. The name hit like a dropped hammer. Mercer, Jace echoed. He ain't a man. He's a blade wrapped in skin. He knew my father, she said. Used to hunt for him. Find girls. Bring them back. Her hands trembled. When I ran, I hoped, he'd let me go. But he doesn't forget. Jace looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to the barn. Come on, he said. We're wasting daylight. They spent the rest of the day setting traps near the tree line, checking rifle loads, and sharpening blades. Sadie followed his lead, soaking up every word, every motion. She didn't ask what the plan was. She already knew. They'd stand their ground, or they'd fall trying. That evening, Jace took her out past the corral, set up empty bottles on fence posts. He handed her the Winchester. Ever fired one? No, she admitted, gripping it awkwardly. He guided her hands, firm but gentle. Don't think. Just breathe. Aim where you want the pain to stop. The first shot went wide. The second hit wood. By the fifth, the bottle shattered. She flinched at the sound, then smiled. You did that, he said. I didn't think I could. That's what they count on. Keep you thinking you're weak. Back inside, Jace cleaned the rifles while Sadie lit the lamps. Her fingers moved with more confidence now. She hadn't flinched at the recoil, hadn't hesitated. Something was shifting inside her, like the snapping of a rope gone too tight. When night came, it brought a storm. Not thunder or rain, but something leaner, more dangerous. Boone rode in just before midnight, silent as a shadow, horse steaming from the ride. He dismounted, stepped to the barn, and cut the reins on the colt just to send a message. He left a token hanging from the fence post, a leather strap, coiled like a snake, with Sadie's initials carved into the edge. Jace found it before dawn. Sadie stared at it without a word. She didn't cry. She didn't ask what it meant. She just said, "He's close." Jace nodded. Close enough to bleed. They didn't eat breakfast. No one was hungry. Instead, Jace led her to a small ravine behind the property. High ground with a clear view of the pasture. He showed her where to wait, what to watch for, how to breathe slow under pressure. "Why were you doing this?" she asked. He looked at her, jaw clenched. "Because someone should have stopped it a long time ago." She wanted to say more, to thank him maybe, but the words stuck. Instead, she pressed a hand against his arm. That was enough. By afternoon, the sun was high and hot. Sweat clung to skin. Silence draped the ranch like a shroud. Then came the hoofbeats. Boone didn't announce himself. He just appeared, riding slow, rifle across his saddle. He stopped near the front gate, just outside range. Jace stepped out with his shotgun resting easy in his hands. "You lost, Mercer?" Boone smiled. "Not anymore. You come for her?" Boone shrugged. "She belongs to a man who paid me well to bring her back." Jace took a step forward. "She don't belong to anyone." Boone's smile faded. "Then I'll take her over your dead body." Jace raised the shotgun. "That's the idea." Neither moved. The air held its breath. Then Boone turned the horse and trotted back into the trees, disappearing like smoke. Sadie came down from the ravine, face pale but determined. "He's testing us," she said. Jace nodded. "Next time, he won't knock." She looked up at him, voice steady. "Then we make sure it's his last time." He watched her walk back to the cabin, rifle slung over her shoulder, sun cutting a halo around her form. The girl who wouldn't cry was gone now. In her place stood someone forged by fear and ready to fight. The night fell thick and heavy, moonless and cruel. Wind whispered through the tall grass like it knew what was coming. Jace sat at the table, sharpening his knife in slow, steady strokes, while Sadie loaded bullets into the cylinder of the Colt he'd lent her. Neither spoke. Words had dried up. What hung between them now was understanding, a silent pact sealed in grit and shared danger. Outside, the crickets stopped. Jace stood, stepped to the door, and eased it open just enough to peer into the dark. A sliver of movement caught his eye, a flicker of shadow too deliberate to be animal. He closed the door with a quiet click and turned to her. "He's here." Sadie nodded, lips pressed tight. She checked the revolver one last time, then tucked it into her waistband. Her hands didn't shake. They moved through the cabin in near silence. Jace doused the lamp, slipped out the back with Sadie close behind. The sky was a wash of dark blue. The only light came from the smoldering embers of the fire they'd let die on purpose. Boone didn't charge the front gate. He was smarter than that. He came through the barn, creeping low, using the shadows as a shield. His boots made no sound on the packed dirt. He didn't know Sadie was already waiting near the loft, rifle resting on a beam. The Colt snorted in its stall as Boone slipped past. Sadie steadied her breath, her finger hovering just above the trigger. She could end it right now. One shot to the head, and he dropped like a sack of grain. But something in her held back. Not fear, clarity. She needed to see his eyes when it happened. Jace circled wide, coming in from the far side of the barn with the shotgun at his hip. As Boone reached for the latch to the cabin door, Sadie called out, "Looking for me?" He spun, gun in hand. Her shot rang out, grazing his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He staggered, cursed, fired blindly into the dark. Jace moved fast, barreling into Boone and knocking him off balance. They hit the dirt hard, rolling through dust and hay. Boone fought like a wild dog, elbows, fists, teeth. Jace took a punch to the ribs, but landed two of his own. Boone scrambled back, bleeding and snarling, eyes full of hatred. "You should have stayed out of it, Carter." Jace wiped blood from his lip. "You shoot V, come back." Boone raised his gun again. A shot cracked. He froze. Sadie stood 10 paces away, revolver aimed steady. The barrel smoked. Boone looked down. Blood bloomed on his side. He laughed once, a cruel, rattling sound. "You ain't got it in you, girl. You're nothing but your father's shadow." "I'm not him," she said, stepping closer. I'm not you either. But I'm done running. Boone lifted his arm to fire, a twitch of instinct more than thought. She didn't wait. Her second shot caught him square in the chest. He dropped without ceremony. Silence fell again. Not the uneasy kind, but the heavy quiet of something finished. Jace walked to her, hand on her shoulder. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She just lowered the gun and stared at the man who had haunted her every dream since childhood. He would have kept coming, she said, no matter how far I ran. I know, Jace answered. You did what had to be done. I still hate it. That's how you know you ain't like him. They buried Boone just outside the fence line, under a flat stone with no name. The next morning, Jace burned the blood-stained hay and scrubbed the barn floor clean. Sadie watched from the porch, arms crossed tight. The smell of smoke drifted up to her, sharp and final. By the third day, the colt came to her without coaxing. She brushed his coat in slow, patient strokes. His limp was healing, but he still favored his bad leg. You reckon he'll trust again? She asked. Jace leaned against the post nearby. In time. Same as people. She looked up. What happens now? He took a breath, long and deliberate. Now, we keep moving. You stay here long as you want. Or longer. I'll get the paperwork in town, make it official. She blinked. You do that. I already did, he said with a slight grin. Last time I went in. Figured you'd need something real to stand on. Her throat tightened. Thank you. He tipped his hat. Ain't a thing. That evening, they sat on the porch again, side by side. The light was golden warm. She rested her head against the post, and for the first time, she looked peaceful. You still miss her? She asked. Every damn day, Jace said. But now it don't hurt as much. Not when I've got something worth protecting again. Sadie smiled, soft and slow. Not forced. Not fleeting. The wind picked up, rustling the grass, but it didn't carry menace this time. Only the scent of dust and sage. Sometimes the West didn't break you. Sometimes it shaped you into something unshakable. And sometimes, just sometimes, two lost souls met where the dirt was honest and the sky was wide, and built something that could last. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.